Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2009 post-apocalyptic drama, The Road. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I would like to give a special shout out to Leon for requesting this review, and if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to either my PayPal or to my Patreon. The link to both is in the video description down below, and I will try to get to your request as soon as I possibly can. Now, The Road is based on a novel by Cormac McCarthy, and I remember reading the novel for a college class years ago, and I never really got around to seeing the movie adaptation because, in all honesty, I wasn't a super big fan of the book. Like, I didn't mind the book, it was interesting, but it wasn't a book that I would consider to be one of my personal favorites. I feel that there was a lot in it that was just ridiculously over the top in terms of shock value, and I didn't really have that much of a connection to it because there's deliberately not much character depth. You don't really know really anyone's name except for one character. It was just one of those books that I'm like, okay, all right, I get what the writer's trying to go for. There were some good quotes here, and it's not necessarily a bad concept. It just wasn't executed in the way that I personally would prefer. So I skipped the film adaptation for that reason, even though I remember seeing a trailer for it and it looked like it might be all right, at least worth one watch for Viggo Mortensen. And after finally seeing the movie, yeah, that's basically how I feel about this film. It's worth at least one watch for Viggo Mortensen, the direction, and the cinematography, and maybe a few other elements, but it just doesn't have that consistent emotional connection that I feel a film like this that is relying so heavily upon two characters and their relationship with one another needs to have in order to become something truly special. I know I'm kind of alone on this. A lot of people feel otherwise. They think this film is compelling, it's a triumph, it's an astounding movie, it's a masterwork, and to each their own. I don't have a problem with that opinion. It's just one that I personally don't agree with. To me, this is just kind of one of those middle of the road movies. No pun intended. It's directed by John Hillcoat, and his direction is great for the kind of film that this is, which is supposed to be a very bleak, a very depressing movie dealing with a father and son trying to survive the apocalypse. It's a film that definitely visually fits what the novel was trying to get across in terms of just the streets just being strewn with garbage and carts and just finding dead bodies and skeletons and all this kind of horror around every turn, uh, having all of these different moments throughout the story where the father and son have to fend for themselves and survive and not only find food and water but also find a way to prevent themselves from becoming dinner for these groups of roaming cannibals. And visually, the film, despite how bleak it is, I think there's a certain beauty to it. Like, there's some great looking shots in this of the desolate landscapes, and it really does create a very distinct uh, setting for the film and a very consistent visual tone. I think John did a good job shooting the flashback scenes too before the apocalypse, or the scenes that were happening between the father and his wife. when his son is born, or the scenes between his father and his wife when his wife decides to go out on her own in the middle of the winter and take her own life. The way that things are lit, the way that things are set up in terms of the shots, it's very claustrophobic. It's very foreboding when it needs to be, but it's also very hopeful and very. I don't think poignant is the right word, but it definitely is something that evokes a completely different emotion than the emotion and the overall tone that you get visually throughout the movie during the post-apocalyptic scenes. So there's a good contrast between the the present, which is horrible and brutal and awful, and the past, the memories of the past, the good times. And it's not a film that has direction that features a significant amount of camera tricks, but I don't think that was necessary for this kind of movie. What Hillcoat does instead is create some absolutely jaw-dropping establishing shots and wide shots. There's a wide shot in particular where the father and son are rolling their cart through a forest that's on fire at night, and that scene is so visually striking. And there's other sequences just with them just roaming this desolate uh uh aftermath of the apocalypse that are just shot in a way where it really does create a sizable and rather stupendous scope. And despite the low budget, it just feels like it's a bigger movie because of that. So yeah, one of the biggest selling points for me when it comes to this movie is definitely John Hillcoat's direction. He did a great job. The script by Joe Penhall, though apparently he was given the job because he was willing to essentially just copy and paste a novel into a screenplay. He was going to utilize all of the dialogue. He wasn't going to change a thing, and I can see why that's something that is a selling point for a producer of this movie, especially someone who's a significant fan of the novel. But I think that has its own limitations. A novel is a different form of entertainment and a different narrative medium than a movie. So to just limit yourself to what the novel provides is a mistake, if you ask me. And I think what works in a novel in terms of not knowing who these characters are, except little bits here and there with the man and his past with his wife, it really makes it so you don't really have that much of a strong emotional connection with people because you don't really get to know them on a deeper level. It's very superficial. I mean, even the kid, like, you don't really get to know a whole lot about him other than he's tapped a little bit more into whatever innocence still remains in this world. But other than that, like, what is he like? What is his passions? Other than trying to help people who are in need. Like, what are his other passions? Like, I know it's apocalypse, but I'm pretty sure there are other things that he likes. And furthermore, like, what more do you get to know about the man other than he was married to the woman who was his wife? You don't get any of that when it comes to this script because it's closely following the novel, which didn't provide you any of that. And another thing that I feel holds this film back is that, like the novel, it doesn't have a clear antagonist. So you already have these vague protagonists who you don't really know that much about, other than superficial, bare minimum kind of things involving them and their characters. Now you have an antagonist that is completely non-existent. So you have protagonists that are vague and aren't that clear, and now you have non-existent antagonists. You have random roving bands of cannibals and marauders, but no one that is a clear leader of a group, and no one that becomes a clear enemy of the man and the son. It seems like there might be potential for that when it comes to a scene where the son is taken by one of these marauders, and then his father shoots the guy and saves his son, and it seems like the rest of that group is going to chase after them, but they hide in the woods, and then the group moves away, and you never see or hear from that particular group again. Instead, there's a different group that shows up later on in a scene where the man and his son, they go into this cellar, and they find a bunch of people who are trapped there so they can be used as food for these other marauders who are eating them. And it's a tense scene. It's a very intense sequence full of very visceral imagery, but even that doesn't lead to anything except just a brief burst of visceralness. And yeah, there's various different people that the man and his son encounter throughout the story on their trip south. And there are people that shoot the man with arrows, or people try to take their cart, and all this other stuff. But there's no clear antagonist. It's just bad people and the environment, the post apocalyptic environment itself. And to me, that's not compelling enough for a feature film. What might work for a novel doesn't necessarily translate the same way on screen. I think some adjustments should have been made in the film adaptation by providing the story with a clear antagonist and more backstory for the father and the son. I don't think that's a problem. I don't think that's something that weakens the impact of this movie. I think it would honestly strengthen it. I think it would make it better because there's more reasons to be drawn into the story. It becomes a more compelling narrative overall in a much more consistent fashion instead of just being compelling and kind of harrowing and interesting every now and then. It becomes meandering after a while because it doesn't seem like there's any genuine conflict other than the vague notion of trying to survive. And it doesn't help either that the father and son bits, they also are really kind of pointless because it's not like the father teaches his son anything throughout the majority of the story. And I don't remember if that was in the novel or not. And if it was, that's another thing that should have been changed, because so much of the focus of this story is on the father and the son. And initially, it's not a bad start to these two and their dynamic with one another for like the first 5 to 10 minutes. But then when the kid starts opening his mouth and he starts crying, and seemingly every other scene, and it's just so overly emotional, and the father is not teaching him how to toughen up or how to defend himself. Every instance when there's any sort of moment where the two are in danger, he is just taking on the full responsibility, and he's not recruiting his son to help him in any capacity. There are some times where he might leave his son behind with their equipment and with their food, like the scene near the end when they're at the beach, and he gives him a gun and tells him, watch out, to watch for people. But because he never trained him anything substantial other than, oh, if times get real hard, here's how you put a gun in your mouth and pull the trigger and kill yourself. Other than that, he didn't teach him anything substantial. So no wonder he just fell asleep. And even if he was awake, what could he have done? Except maybe pull the trigger and waste the one bullet that they have left? He didn't even like teach him how to shoot the gun. I mean, you only have one bullet, so I get it, but I don't know. Maybe there you could have changed something around where they found a BB gun or something along the way, and so he teaches the kid how to shoot with the BB gun, or teaches the kid how to use a knife, teaches the kid how to hunt, something. But that never happens. There's nothing like that throughout this script. The father never teaches his son anything other than when times get tough, kill yourself. Even when it comes to like foraging for food or doing this other stuff, he does everything. So the script doesn't do a good job either when it comes to providing these two characters with a stronger dynamic and multiple instances where they learn from one another throughout their journey. The only times they learn from one another is when there's a random scene near the end where when the man is all of a sudden gone off the edge and holds this one guy who stole their cart on the beach at gunpoint, goes way too far, tells him to take all his clothes off to the point where he's naked, and then takes the cart back, leaves the guy there to die, and then his son gets through to him that that's wrong, and then he allows his son to like leave the guy's clothes behind with some food, but you never see the guy again. So it's, I guess it's pretty much insinuated that the guy died already. So it's like, okay, you taught him how to not be an asshole in that moment, but it didn't really stick. And also, the man died of cancer, like it's seemingly maybe like a week or two later. So there was never any time for that lesson to stick in the first place. So what lesson did he learn? Nothing. And there's also like lines of dialogue that I feel are just creating some very conflicting messages. Like there's a line from the man where he's talking about how, in times like these, when you stop having dreams about things going wrong and you start having dreams of the good times, that's when you know that it's your time, or it's time to go, or it's time to worry. And I'm like, what? Like, oh, when you're not having nightmares about this post-apocalyptic wasteland and you're actually having dreams, dreaming of a better time, uh that's when things are truly rough and truly a problem. And I'm like, what kind of message is that? Like, it just seems very confusing, and I don't think it's good advice either. Like, oh hey, when things are tough, like don't think about when times were better. Like, I I I just don't get it. Also, that kind of carries over to the stuff with the woman, with the wife. Like, she has a kid and she has a husband, and because she doesn't want to deal with another cold winter or deal with this harsh wasteland anymore, she decides to abandon her son and her husband and go wander off into the woods in the middle of the winter and kill herself. Oh, things are get really tough for me and my husband and my son. I'm gonna kill myself. Like, it seemed like that was like the only option. And I get it, it's trying to show a different kind of perspective, but the perspective that this script shows, and honestly, in all honesty, the novel showed, was very flawed, because there would be way more people who would be like, no, I'm not going to take the easy way out. I'm not going to kill myself. I'm going to go out there. I'm going to fight. If I'm going to die, I'm going to die with my family. I'm not going to give up on my family and because I can't deal with this anymore. Like, I'm not going to do that. You'd have the people who would be like, well, you know, it looks like the end is here. Well, I'm not going to go out and be selfish and kill myself and then leave my other family members to fend for themselves in this nightmare. I'll take them with me. You know that I get that. And I get that there were some lines of dialogue where she was trying to get them to go along with that, but they disagreed and so on and so forth. But yeah, there's just too many people in this world that were just way too quick to give up. Also, there's also problems in terms of like how quick people are willing to go to cannibalism. And the cannibalism stuff in particular, it just feels like it's there for shock value. I mean, this is a novel that had a scene with a baby on a spit roast. And apparently they shot that scene for the film, but they cut it out because they thought it was too extreme. Understandably so. Because it really is. But yeah, it's just a script where, other than the wasteland itself, scenes of the father and son like sharing a Coke, the scene where they find the bunker with all the food and they have some good bonding moments there between father and son, the scene with Eli, the wandering homeless drifter played by Robert Duvall, uh, and maybe some of the more tension filled scenes like the sequence when they're in the cellar with all the people that are going to be eaten and they narrowly escape with their lives out of the house, or the scene earlier on when they get involved in a conflict with this other group of roaming marauders, and the son is held at knife point and the father saves him. Other than that kind of stuff, there's so many scenes of that the father and son just not really doing much of anything except just walking down the road going south, and after a certain point that just becomes very tedious and dull and boring because there's no clear conflict. And even the goal is vague. Go south. There's not even any evidence that there's anything south that is worth going towards in the first place. And I get it. It's a sad film. It's a sad story. So was the novel. But there's really not a lot of moments in this where you feel like there is hope. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. There's moments that are very fleeting. It's kind of just a glimmer in the distance. And I get that that's the intent, but I'm just not able to really get into stories that much where things are just so hopelessly bleak. Like, even the ending of the movie, after the kid loses his father to what I think is supposed to be cancer, he finds another family. And they say that they've been following him and his father around, and they're happy that he's alive, and they're looking forward to having him be a part of their family. It's still underlined with this hopelessness because, okay, yeah, he's going to spend time with this new family now, so he's not going to be fending for himself uh, in this wasteland. But his father is still dead. His mother killed herself. And yeah, he's got this new family. But given the way that things are, like the chances that they're going to live a long and happy and fruitful life are next to none. So it's still incredibly bleak and depressing. And I get it, that's the point. I just don't care for those kind of stories because I think they're very limiting. It's the same way I feel about a story that's just overly happy and hopeful. Like there are some stories like that where it's the opposite. Like that's just too much happiness to the point where it feels like a fantasy, and it's not really that relatable as a result. And here it's just so depressing, soul sucking, so bleak that it doesn't feel like it's something that I really connect with either, because it's so much in that extreme when it comes to the direction of the story. But I do appreciate the authenticity of the post-apocalyptic wasteland, uh, the reality of scrounging for your next meal and trying to fend off other people who are starving and equally as desperate as you are. But the fact that you don't have that much character depth when it comes to the father and the son, other than the bare minimum, the fact that there is no antagonist, which I think that could have been an easy fix. Like, just have one of the cannibal groups be the group of antagonists. Like the group that was trying to kill the father's son. They realized that the father killed one of their own, and so they continually chase the father and son throughout the story. So instead of it being one of those things where, oh, we gotta leave, we gotta go, we gotta keep going because somebody might be coming for us. Somebody might attack us. Now it's a consistent threat. It's like we got to keep going. We got to keep going south because they're on our tail. Like if we stop, they're gonna get us. And that could create some tension in that scene when they are in the other bunker with all the food, and they're having their almost kind of Dawn of the Dead moment, in the abandoned mall where they're trying to recreate a semblance of what a normal life used to be. And you have that tension now, similar to Dawn of the Dead, where it's like, okay, yeah, they're trying to live their life, but there's this impending doom that's on the outside. Instead, it's just this vague doom where it's like it could come, but it might not. And it's just like, that's not good tension. Good tension and suspense is something that's prominent, something that's consistent, and that's just not there in this story, in this script. And I firmly believe that it's not there because it wasn't in the novel. So what? This is a film adaptation. You could take some creative liberties. Who cares if Cormac McCarthy would look at it and be like, well, I didn't ask for that. Well, you should have wrote that in your story to begin with, because it just becomes a meandering, I wouldn't say mess, but it just becomes a meandering tale of relative depressing indifference, because there's nothing that's really consistent when it comes to tension or any sort of moments to provide genuine thrills or excitement throughout the story, other than just the notion of survival itself. But that's just me personally. And because of just how weak this script and this story is for me, it's kind of wasting some really remarkable performances by some of the actors in this cast. In particular, Viggo Mortensen. Like, this is one of his best acting performances. Like, he was absolutely astounding in this. One of the main reasons why I kept watching this film, despite not being that emotionally invested in it, is because of Viggo Mortensen and his performance. Like, he was really terrific in this film. Like, he went all out. He slept in his clothes. He didn't eat. Uh, he literally starved himself for this role, and that commitment really paid off. And it made for an unbelievably affecting and compelling performance. I just wish it was a part of a much more compelling narrative. The actor who played the boy, the son, Kodi Smit-McPhee, I know he's gotten praise, but I didn't really think he did that great of a job. Apparently, he got the job because his father sent in an audition tape of him reenacting the scene from the novel where the dad teaches the kid how to shoot himself. And that's how the kid got the role. Not with a screen test, not with anything like that. Some videotape that a father sent in of his son. I think that was not necessarily the best reason to cast this kid in this movie, because if you had a screen test, maybe you would see that this kid has a little bit more limitations as an actor than you might think. Um, but that's just me personally. I know a lot of people think this kid is great, but I didn't think he was that convincing. I really did not, especially when it comes to the moments when he's supposed to be emotional. Other than the one scene when he cried in the woods when his dad was washing his hair after a near-death experience, I didn't buy it. And the reason why is because that scene was him actually crying. Like, that wasn't even him acting. So that's why it seemed like it was so real, because it was real. Uh, Charlize Theron, she's barely even in the film at all, so there's really not a whole lot to say about her performance. But it's good for what little that she had to work with. I never really felt like she was that clear of a character. Robert Duvall as the old man Eli, I thought he was excellent. In fact, he was so good. I wish he was in the film more. Guy Pearce, he plays the veteran near the end, who's the father wandering around with his family. I said father wandering around with his father. Nope, not that kind of family. Molly Parker plays the veteran's wife. Michael K. Williams is in this as the thief who stole the car on the beach, who gets left behind butt naked in the cold. Not really the most wide cast when it comes to like talents, because there's not really a lot of cast members. Really, the most screen time is Viggo Mortensen and Kodi Smit-McPhee. And if you think that Kodi is doing a really great job and you like that character, you can get more out of the film. If you feel otherwise, it's another reason why the film's kind of a slog, because you're like, I don't really care about this kid. I'm not really into his character. Yeah, I appreciate that he means well and wants to look for the good in people, but he's whiny, he's crying all the time, and he never really does anything to show that he can fend for himself. Which, in this kind of movie, with this kind of environment, I don't get it. I don't understand why there's this approach that this kid is like a toddler and or a baby, and he's not allowed to train. He's not allowed to show scenes where he effectively showcases that he can survive on his own. And it's got some good cinematography by Javier Aguirre Azrobe. I mean, it's a very gray, dark, and dingy looking movie, but that's the apocalypse. So it's fitting and it works for this kind of movie for me personally. The editing by John Gregory, it was also fine. I didn't think it was fantastic or amazing, but it was fine. The music by Nick Cave and Warren Ellis, though, I thought that was spectacular. You don't really hear a lot of music in this film, but what you do hear is some really emotionally resonant work by Nick Cave and company. The main theme in particular, it really evokes a lot of emotions of tragedy and loss, but also a little bit of innocence. And it's a really a great piece. And it's another element of the film that I wish was just in a much better overall movie. It's 111 minutes and it feels long because, like I said, there's no real concrete conflict throughout other than the notion of surviving another day and going south. Other than that, there's nothing else. So it just becomes just a meh movie to me. It's not a film that I have any desire to watch again, and it's not just because of the subject matter. It's because of the plot and the script and the story. Like, it's just not that compelling to me. Despite some good cinematography, good direction, a good score, and a great central performance by Viggo Mortensen. But anyway, that's just my thoughts on The Road, and thanks for watching, and as always, I'll see you later. See ya.